How is FSD doing for you today?
I haven't driven it yet today, but I am planning to drive it out into the more dense part of LA. I'm going to the Cheesecake Factory at the Grove. And so I'll be driving from the South Bay area of LA where my parents live to West Hollywood and to the Grove. So we'll get to see more testing in LA. I'll record some videos there. But my videos yesterday here in the more suburban South Bay area, they were all zero intervention. There was a little bit of rolling some stop signs in the Terranea sort of parking lot area. They weren't like real stop signs. It kind of like went down to six for some of them, stopped for some of them. But overall, I think it's looking exceptional. There's a little bit of hesitation sometimes when I wish it would go faster, when it's clear and it's just sort of waiting. So I think that's one area that they could improve on too. But overall, I think it's looking pretty good, and I'm excited for the next build that I hear is coming.
Any updates on when the next build might be coming?
Well, I'm hoping this weekend or next weekend, and that could be accompanied with an expansion to more early access testers. So that's something that I'm looking forward to as well. I'm looking forward to, for example, Chuck trying his left turn in Florida and people all around the country trying it because I tried it in San Francisco and LA. It looks pretty good, but I'm interested to really see how it works across the country. So it's not like that bad that early access testers can't handle it. So I would send it out to the early access testers with the next build. I think that's what they're going to do. And yeah, that should be coming up pretty shortly. I think it was supposed to come maybe last weekend. It's the point 13 build. We did see it surface on Tesla Scope and Tesla Fi, but the recall and needing to make some of those changes kind of delayed that slightly. But it should be going out hopefully in the coming weeks, this week or next weekend.
Is there any specific edge case in downtown LA, the busier part of LA that you said that it used to struggle with the V11 that you're looking forward to testing?
Well, y- generally it has done pretty good in LA, not perfect. But there's definitely a lot of moments that sort of made me sweat or, felt kind of uncomfortable, jerking back and forth in like dense LA traffic, that type of stuff. I mean, in LA, it's very different than San Francisco. San Francisco, you've got hills, you got people, you got a road that goes straight up or straight down, but you don't really have that much traffic unless you're like trying to get in or out of the city. But in LA, you have a lot of traffic and people who are just angry that they're in traffic. So you see people just do crazy, crazy things just to, get out of the situation that they're in. So it can be a little bit unpredictable, and it'll be interesting to see how FSD Beta 12 handles that. It seems to be much more natural about handling others, handling other cars, handling other pedestrians. One moment that I really like that I called out was I was making a U-turn on FSD Beta 12 yesterday, which honestly is amazing in itself that it can make a U-turn so well now. But as I was making a U-turn, a guy just started running out in front of the car, and it didn't slam on the brakes or anything like that. It just slowly continued moving forward, just a little bit slower, but it knew it was slow enough that it wasn't going to go anywhere near him. And so it just continued making that U-turn without stopping. 11 would have slammed on the brakes. It would have felt like a slap in the face, even though it was probably going to be nowhere close to hitting him. But 12 was just smooth. It just stayed the course. And that's kind of the general theme. It's just so much more natural at how it interacts with other cars and pedestrians. So it'll be interesting to see, when I record the video later today and publish it later tonight, how it does in the much more challenging area of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Waymo hit a cyclist in San Francisco. It sounds like the cyclist is okay, luckily. Minor scratches, so that's good. It seems like it was a low speed incident in the Portero Hill neighborhood. And it, I don't think their permit's going to get pulled over this. If you remember, Cruz's permit really got pulled over the lying. It wasn't the accident, it was the lying. After that, I don't think Waymo's gonna lie. I expect them to be fully transparent. And I don't expect this to be a pull the permit kind of moment based on what I'm seeing. The person who was hit seems to be fine. The passenger seems to be fine. I wouldn't be surprised if they sued Waymo or something just because they could probably get a huge settlement. But it seems like everything is kind of okay. We can't really expect self-driving cars to have zero accidents. All we can really hope for is that they dramatically bring down the rate of accidents. And Waymo's done some good independent studies with insurance companies and others that suggest that 80% of injury causing crashes are reduced by self-driving cars. And I believe them. You can just see based on how it drives. It just drives much more carefully than a human would. Almost, too carefully, really. So that's that's kind of interesting story that came out that happened Tuesday evening, but it may sort of internally affect the leadership's thinking in terms of their rate of expansion. Right now, they're open to the public in one market, which is the Phoenix metro area, and they're invite only in San Francisco and Los Angeles. So they are expanding. Hopefully, at some point, they're actually able to open to the public in San Francisco and LA. But the management's very cautious. They're not aggressive at all, the way that Elon is or the way that Cruz seem to be. They're very kind of like, look, if this takes 50 years, whatever. So I could see this kind of incident maybe slowing them down a little bit potentially. And I'm interested to see more footage of the incident or anything else that can kind of suggest what the problem is, right? Because just going back to the perception discussion, right? This was the big thing. Do you need LiDAR or do you not? And what this incident really shows is you need intelligence to avoid hitting people. Your perception is actually, you can have a range of perception capability and probably achieve autonomy. But what you need is the intelligence to say, okay, this truck is passing me, but I need to make sure there's nobody behind the truck, right? So again, you can have this great perception system, but LiDAR can't go through a truck, right? Only intelligence can make you understand that there could be someone behind that truck.
Thank you, Amar. We have a question for you in the replies. If anybody has any questions for a request to speak, or you may leave a reply below the X space or in YouTube comments. The question from Dominus Ignota is, how does FSD do with road debris?
It tries to go around it. It's been raining here. There is a lot of debris in the road. So it will actually go around debris in the road.
Does a good job with that.
Have you seen faster iterations over V12 than what you saw previously?
This first V12 build is obviously a dramatic step ahead of V11, but it's the only build I've received, so I don't have any idea of what the rate of iteration is going to be between V12 builds. Maybe after this next one comes, I can tell you, but right now I've got one data point.
Ethan DeVries asks in the replies, does V12 handle speed bumps well? 11.4.9 still likes to blow right through them.
Yeah, it's a day and night difference on speed bumps. It handles every speed bump and it goes at a much more proper speed. And it can actually vary the speed depending on the shape and size of the speed bump. So, if you have an issue with speed bumps, this is going to be a dream come true for you. Also slows for like dips in the road and puddles. There were some puddles in the road, it slowed for the puddles. And that, like, you can see that in the video I did with my dad. I think it might still be pinned to my profile. And there's a little highlight in there. If you tap the tweet, you can see all the highlights, and then there's one where it slows down for a puddle. So it can literally see a puddle in the road and just lower its speed slightly. Not like too much, but the proper amount. It's really good. And this is the benefit of the end-to-end system, right? So with the old architecture, we'd have to say, okay, now we need to train a puddle detector. Now we need to train a dip detector. Now we need to train a speed bump detector. And you have to manually think of all the things that people could possibly slow for. and then try and train a detector for it and curate that data set. Okay, we need bigger puddles, smaller puddles. What a fucking nightmare, right? For the team. No wonder they didn't add all this stuff. Now you just say, hey, just look at the video and figure out why people slow. And just look at all the reasons people slow and kind of come up with a general model for it. And we don't have to explain to you what things people slow for. You just look at the data. It's like, boom, light bulb. This is the answer, right? So when we don't have to like tell the team anymore, hey, it doesn't handle this, it doesn't handle that. If he didn't handle puddles, then we would disengage. Or some people would disengage at least. They'd pick up on that, they'd put the videos in the training set. Without even knowing what the issue is, it would get fixed itself. So this is a much more powerful approach. We're not relying anymore on what the team can think of. It just picks up on everything that's in the training data.
Serene asks in the replies, I'm wondering if FSD 12 is ready when it's ready. If it's ready, why not launch robotaxis?
Well, it's definitely not ready for robotaxis. Like, I've had incidents where, for example, there are like these little things sticking up in the road, like you can see in my AI driver video. There's these like little white pillars. And FSD Beta 11 used to handle it just fine. But FSD Beta 12 got a little bit too close to the one on the left side. I had to disengage. And there was one where I felt like it was getting too close to a motorcyclist. There were some other safety critical takeovers that I made, more than version 11. So not only is version 12 not ready for Robotaxi, it's not even as good as V11 in terms of its safety critical disengagements. However, given what I'm talking about, you can really see the potential of this architecture. And I expect it to completely leapfrog V11 very soon. And at that point, they would send it out and then just go far above what V11 is capable of. But by no means is it ready for Robotaxi right now. But I think it's an incredibly promising approach that has a much better chance of achieving autonomy than the other architecture. As a matter of fact, the other architecture was just a dead end. We achieved a local maximum on V11. I mean, I think that's as good as you can get that approach, but it's fundamentally the wrong approach. And so now we're going to try this. And this is probably the wrong approach too, but it's probably a little bit less wrong, right? So that's the thing about software. People project it linearly. They go, okay, V11 isn't getting much better, so the software can't get much better. What they don't realize is with software, you can completely invent a new architecture, a new paradigm, and do things completely differently. You can discover something based on a technology or a technique that hasn't even been invented yet, right? And you can send that out as a software update. So that's really what we're betting on here. The cars have the motors to move the wheels, to move the pedals, and they can update their software. So this is a much better software approach. There's probably going to be other discoveries they make in the future, but your sort of linear extrapolation of how 11 is improving, and people looking at these FSD trackers and everything, trying to figure out what the rate of improvement is, that totally doesn't account for a complete rewrite like V12. That is just a quantum leap forward. Like, you've never seen so many little issues get fixed. I was pulling out of Terranea, which is kind of in the neighborhood here by my parents' house, and it would always go into this street. And so the lane that it turns into when it's making a left, there's a little bit of a merge arrow. And so humans would mostly kind of drive on the right side. In the left side of the road where the merge arrow is, there's like all these rocks and stuff because it gets kind of kicked off to the side of the road. And for years, the car would kind of drive straight into there and it would kick up all these rocks. And I would often disengage because I didn't want it, kicking up rocks and damaging my car. So just like, little annoyances like that where it's just totally unaware. And this new version, it just goes and it just drives in the right place where the rocks aren't. And it's like, oh my God, finally. And then it just quickly changed lanes over to the right side. And I mean, just so many different categories of issues. My parents have a they live in a gated community. So to get out of the gate, you need to actually creep up to the gate, and then the gate will open. For more than 3 years, no version of FSD beta ever did this. And it's probably so far down on the list of things that are important to the team that it, would have never gotten fixed. But FSD beta 12 just does it. It just does it perfectly every time. It hesitates a little bit more than I would like, but then it just goes up to the gate and the gate opens. So I think what people are going to find is just more fixes for long-standing issues than they've ever seen in a single update before. And maybe some steps back in some areas. But AI Driver had a really good way of putting it. He said normally it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. This is 5 steps forward, 1 step back.
Watching the video from this morning was great. It was really cool to see it go around essentially that roundabout, and it seems to be handling better. I don't know if you feel like it's gotten any better, but it's probably materially the same. But it just was really good to see, and looking forward to getting it on more cars soon.
There's another question in the comments, Omar. Another good question from Dominus Ignota. Do you know if Tesla is notifying communities of safety issues with road design, blind spots, signage issues that may be hazardous in general from their video data? I think the question is more around, like, is Tesla proactive? Like, if you run into, if your cameras pick up on a pothole, do they call up the local authority?
Yeah,
Hey,
I mean, to
we
the
have a
best of
pothole.
my knowledge, they don't do anything like that today, and it would probably be a little bit confusing figuring out who to call. So, I mean, maybe in the future they could do something like that. They could provide data to people. And I think infrastructure generally is going to be more and more accommodative to self-driving cars. That's the thing about people starting to use ADAS systems like this and people getting this software out there. People are going to care if their infrastructure, their signage, their traffic lights are clear, if they're easy for these AI systems to understand. And the infrastructure will actually move in the right direction. I could see in the future, they would be notified of any pothole or issue with the road instantly because you'd have a self-driving car driving past there, probably within a few minutes. So that's definitely the future, but I don't think they're doing it today.
The new architecture, FSD version 12, how fast do you think this will iterate?
Well, theoretically, and this is only theoretical, of course, because I only have one build, but theoretically, it should improve much faster. Because rather than having to identify the issue, source the training data, retest it, make sure the C++ code works, all you have to really do is just put more video into the data set and train it again. And you can fix an issue without the team even being aware necessarily of what the issue is, right? Just by sourcing that data from the training fleet and adding it to the training set. And of course, you have to curate the data set very well, but you don't have to think of every issue yourself, if that makes sense. You don't have to listen to all the people on Twitter and say, okay, we need to do this or we need to do that. We need to write a new C++ code that does this. We need to, change the planning code to do that. All you have to do is just find a video of it being done correctly. That's it. And you train. And the model should figure out how to do it, theoretically. So this is all theoretical. Once we get a few V12 builds, we'll see how it actually works in practice. For all we know, it could be getting worse, more because of the neural nets. You've seen, for example, with ChatGPT, people have talked about GPT-4 getting worse, right? This model training is like kind of a way, you don't really know how it's going to discover the solution to the problem. So some people have complained, for example, that ChatGPT has gotten lazy. It used to write all this code for you. Now it kind of writes, like the bare bones sort of like functions name, like pseudocode, puts a comment like implement function here, you know? So I think y- we don't know really for sure. In theory, it should iterate faster, but once we have a few builds, we can maybe say with more certainty whether it's actually iterating faster or not.
Yeah, I mean, I get his the other guy's points, cusp. but Tesla's not on the cusp of robotaxis yet. They're a little further away, and I think it's not fair to say that none of that stuff's being valued. At their current sort of market cap of 600 billion, probably 200 to 300 billion of that is future earnings on these future products. You could certainly argue that that's still going to be under what those are worth, especially if they figure out robotaxis or Optimus. But the market's assigning a low probability of that right now, and it's up to investors to decide if they think that the probabilities are higher than what the market's valuing it at, and invest accordingly. So, but I would just say it's not like none of those things are valued at all or in the stock price right now.
I think I can get to a $600 billion valuation on the EV business alone, just based on the fact that they have the two best-selling EV models in the world. EVs are taking over the world. When you look at these other auto companies, they're heavily indebted. They have a lot of stranded assets, essentially, or assets that are going to become stranded. And their sales peaked in 2017. When you have no growth, when in fact, instead of growth, it seems like the future is that the sales are going to zero, then you get a multiple like 6, right? People are not going to give you a 20 multiple because they don't think those earnings are going to be sustained. Now, if you've got a company that looks like it has actually decades of growth potential because EV sales are going up every year, that's a very different story from a company that has a negative growth outlook. So I think you could get probably to, 500 or 600 billion just looking at the auto business. And I think the present value of FSD, honestly, from my perspective, is something like $500 billion. But I don't think that the market is assigning a $500 billion value to FSD today. If you look at, for example, companies like Mobileye, which are kind of a standalone of sort of an autopilot-like product, it's got about a $20 billion market cap. So if it was the case that Tesla was being valued highly because of its FSD efforts, then I think you would see Mobileye valued much more highly, and you would see the stock be much less sensitive to auto-related news because that isn't really all that relevant. So, I think probably the market is assigning not more than $100 billion of value to Tesla's AI efforts. And that's probably even, a lot. Obviously, different investors view things differently. But if we're talking about like the market in aggregate, they're probably assigning somewhere between 20 to $50 billion of value for the AI efforts. And they probably consider it almost a liability as much of an asset given, sort of the legal ramifications.
All right. Before we go to Machine for his rant of the day, Meta, I have a question for you, a request, if I may. I asked yesterday Machine to promote my YouTube channel, and he failed miserably. He actually, as he talked, I lost subscribers. And then Omar took over, and he laid down the law, and immediately I got 50 subscribers. Would you please be more like Omar and not less like Machine?
If you don't subscribe, then you shouldn't be listening in this space. And clearly you come to this space for value. So you should subscribe so that the sound quality can be better and that you can get more content.
Perfect. Thank you.
Maybe if enough people subscribe, you can get the length of these spaces back.
That is correct. That's correct. That's possible. Wes?
What is the price for subscribing, Iman?
Free.
Yep, it's free.
$0.
Exactly.
It's literally 5 seconds. At the top of your screens, if you go to that post right there at the top, click on it. One more click and you're subscribed for free. Thank you, Wes. Machine, what's your... Just try not to lose subscribers from me. Thanks.
First of all, I didn't even have a chance to promote your YouTube channel. You muted me and kicked me off instead. So that's your own fault. Do you have something to say about that?
No, I think you just dropped off. I don't need you to
Well, I
drop.
know I had to drop off for a second, and then I came back, and you didn't let me have a chance. So, okay.
All right. Well,
Not
here's your chance. Go ahead.
Folks, if you enjoy listening to Meta and Omar pontificate on FSD or Yaman asking silly questions, then subscribe, like, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hear more of this for hours and hours on end for the rest of your life as Tesla stays around $200 for the next 10 years.
Thank you. All right. So what was your point?
So I was going to say I mostly agree with Omar. I believe the AI efforts are very lowly valued. I believe it is the automotive and future growth of automotive that's most of the value. And so that's why I'm saying things like the 25K model, semi, like those future revenues are, I think actually a lot of them are kind of being valued in right now. And so your best bet, if you think this is going to be a good investment, is that you really are bullish on FSD Robotaxi and Optimus. And I do think he's right that like there is a chance, obviously all these EV makers, no one else is making money. They're losing money hand and foot. And at some point a lot of them are going to go under. And I predict for the first time in this space, that Tesla will be the only automaker by 2025.
Wow.
He's right for some definition of the word first. It is the first time machine has predicted this.
Meta, are you driving?
Can you tell? Yes.
Yeah. You know why I can tell is because you're in an old Tesla, not in a new Tesla. If you had upgraded,
That is completely false. Machine, when are you getting your
what
hard
year is
upgrade?
your Plaid X?
2020.
That's an old model. Yeah, it's 2024, man. 2024. 4 years. That my quality has improved greatly in the last couple of years. And I think just like I should get a new microphone, you should get a new Tesla for the mic quality.
All right. We will see when the Cybertruck update finally makes its way to me.
Machine?
Yeah, just a little side note, but I was out and about today and I found a place that I think you could get a job at, while you're waiting for your subscribers to go up.
I'm not serving you Popeye's chicken, Machine. Not in your wildest dreams.
That would make my day if that day ever came that I showed up in a Popeyes and you were behind the counter. I mean, it would probably surpass the birth of my daughters.
You should clip that and send it back, and everybody can keep playing this, and Machine will have to subscribe and upgrade his hardware before you take the clip down.
I like Machine's humor. But the fact is, sarcastic humor is appreciated by the few. Doesn't have mass appeal, unfortunately. So, but it is what it is.
Sarcasm requires you to be more thoughtful to understand both meanings.
Yeah, thoughtful, thick skin, trust in each other. A lot of requirements for sarcasm to work. Go ahead.
I actually, had a friend who was definitely very, pretty autistic, and I trained him to understand sarcasm, and that was one of my greatest achievements. So I'm ready for, one of you guys. I think you're next.
All right. We have a really good group right now to talk about other things. But Meta, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually have a question for Omar. Have you tried V12 in an underground garage? I saw you tried in a parking lot, but I'm just curious if you've tried in like an area with more or with less visibility because of walls and stuff.
I don't think I have actually, but I'll be in the Grove parking garage tonight, so maybe I'll try it in there, see what it does. I also want, you know what, also kind of want to try it like in a drive-through. Like, I kind of wonder if it'll stop at the window. I don't know.
That's a good test.
When
Does Popeyes have drive-through?
You know, when Omar promoted the account yesterday, I got literally 20, 30 instantly. When Meta talked, I got 4. And then Machine talked, I lost 1. Amazing how that works. Wes?
A question for Omar on V12. Have you seen it say anything about like if one of the cameras was blinded or if there was degraded features because of bad weather? I know you drove
Yeah,
in the rain.
there was some really heavy rain and fog to the point where it said front camera blocked or blinded.
Oh, gotcha. Thanks.
I mean, this was literally like it does pretty well in the rain and fog, but this was like literally a severe weather alert went out saying like do not leave your home. And I think they were being a little dramatic. It was fine. But it was a pretty severe storm required for that to happen. So I did see that pop up.
Did you just see that once?
Yeah, that was probably the only time I saw it so far.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Cool. Well, all things considered, it does seem to be handling poor weather better. So I was just curious if you ever saw that error message come up. One of the reasons I was thinking is that maybe they haven't released it yet because they haven't gotten the error messages all coded up to display at the proper time.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be the issue. Um, it seems to have. Yeah, I don't know if the error messages were really tied to like the old nets or the new nets or whatever, but I did see that pop up.
One question for you guys. A question I keep getting the replies is, when will FSD learn from my own driving locally? Is that ever going to happen? Is that going to happen with V12? Is a common question. When I make a fix, is it going to change behavior? But if not
Never,
V12, do you
not
guys?
locally.
Yeah.
It's already learning from your driving. Like a lot of us who are in this room are probably also in the training set, which is kind of crazy to think about. The model is trained from videos of us doing our daily driving. But you wouldn't want the model to be trained or fine-tuned really locally on the car computer because then it could exhibit unpredictable behaviors that haven't been tested or QA'd, right? You want them to actually train the model, train it on good drivers, not necessarily you, but on good drivers, and then get a model that's well tested and reliable and has passed all the metrics and that is going to not try and crash. If you were to train or even fine tune a model locally, it would be very difficult to predict how that model could behave. You could maybe feed the model some input parameters based on like how um, you think the person's driving, like maybe some preferences or whatever, or like some things about their driving style they've noticed. But you definitely don't want to do the training on the car computer. The car computer helps source training data by doing inference on triggers to find the kind of training data they're looking for. But the actual training process you want to do on like a dojo, a dedicated data center with cooling and all of that. And that has a lot of hardware that is not in the inference computer. So inference is just sort of one part of the training process. You have to inference the model and then you have to try and, alter the weights to minimize the loss. So that's going to be happening in Dojo. It's probably never going to be happening in the car unless there's some kind of dramatic, unforeseen advance in AI that is totally out of left field from what we can see today.
Say, I don't know if the question was more about maybe personalization as opposed to like very unique, specific, targeted training. But I do see personalization as something that it should be an emergent behavior over time as the model starts to understand that in its training set, there's different types of driving, different ways to take turns, different ways to accelerate. And right now they kind of classify those as like very 3 kind of like basic personalization settings, but you could see those expanding quite a bit as it kind of learns, or potentially it allows it to say, hey, like, I've noticed that when you're, not necessarily saying this, but building kind of like a personalization model of how you drive in specific scenarios. And it could potentially ask, to have some amount of quote unquote training data to kind of feed into that model. So I could see it being more personalized, but I agree with Omar that the larger training set, it wouldn't adjust, at a much deeper, more fundamental level. But I could see it being at a higher, more application type level, that type of personalization.
Yeah, I mean, I think personalization is great, and there's ways to achieve that without having to, train on the car or whatever. For example, they've got the profiles, chill, average, or assertive. So that's kind of an example of personalization where they probably, have like an input to the model, what's the setting? And you look at like ChatGPT or other LLMs, they have this system prompt. So I can edit the system prompt in the API, or I can edit the custom instructions via the ChatGPT web interface. And I can say, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to give every answer like you're a pirate. And it'll still answer all the questions the same way the regular model would, but it'll say, arg, answer to your question. So I could see the autonomous software actually having a similar type of facility in the future where it can converse with you and even remember like a sort of system prompt. Like you could tell it, for example, um, I don't like this road, or oh, don't go here at 3 o'clock. That's when the school gets out. Or you could tell it, can you take the scenic route? I like it when you go that way. Or, hey, don't stop so hard here, or whatever, right? You could just speak to it the same way you would speak to a taxi driver in theory, and it should be able to sort of internalize those instructions and even remember those instructions across rides. That obviously doesn't exist today, but that's kind of the direction I could see it going someday in terms of, if the thing is safer than a human, it should also be able to be more intelligent, to understand the background, the context of the world. Um, it should understand when you say, hey, I've got to return this stuff to to Dick's Sporting Goods, and you got a bunch of stuff with you. It should be able to look at that, understand what you mean, and say, okay, I'm going to drop them off really close to the front where they don't have to walk because they have this a lot of stuff with them they have to carry in. So, yeah, this is a little bit far out there in terms of actually shipping as a software update to our car, but I think it could work like that in theory, where you could really talk to it like a human and get it to do exactly what you want it to do.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anyone has any insight as to how long it takes between iterations of updating the model with new video. Like, does Dojo take a day or two or a week to run and create a new model that can be then tested? Does anyone have any insight on that?
Well, we don't have any insight on V12, but we know for some of the older generation models, it was like a few weeks. They've said that in some of their tech talks. So it's probably safe to assume they kind of let it train for a few weeks. Now, you can add more compute and make that go faster, or you can add more compute and train longer. But that it's probably around that range. And Karpathy said that's kind of the maximum amount of time that we can really wait from a practical perspective and still have our sort of development flow work. So yeah, and there's like different like fine tunes you can do and stuff as well. But we don't really know for V12 how long it would take to train it from start to finish. And you can also kind of snapshot and restart training from certain points and edit the data set and things like that. So you don't always have to go like start to finish. But that's what they've said before for the previous versions. And we don't really have any information on what it's going to take with V12. But maybe they would talk a little bit about that at the next AI day, especially if they're talking about Dojo or whatever. It'd be interesting to hear, for example, how long it takes to train on NVIDIA versus Dojo and if there's any difference there.
Does Tesla train the entire model each time, or do they train parts of it sometimes? How often do you think they, and if the latter, how often do they train the entire thing?
Yeah, good question. So the old system used kind of what Andre called a hydronet model. So you'd really have like a model and submodels and subtasks. So you'd have, for example, like, so there's a shared backbone. So all of the detectors, whether it's like a car detector or a motorcycle detector or like a wall detector, kind of had this shared backbone. And then you sort of process the backbone and then you process all the subtasks. So you go, okay, it detects all the cars. Then a subtask of that might be what type of car is it? Is it a car? Is it an SUV? And then that pops up in the visualization too. And you can process it and kind of do inference and do the critical tasks and then do the subtasks. So they could really have different people working on different areas of the model, different sort of subtasks, and then sort of take that back up to the backbone like every once in a while. But now they're kind of moving to one big model. So I'm not sure really how that changes things or um, like how it changes how their development process works. But maybe Meta has some more ideas about that, but I'd have to really wait until we heard more comments from them at some tech talk or AI Day or CVPR or something like that.
I was just going to say quickly, I think with V12 and Omar's videos, it seems very cool that the comfort has improved quite a bit. And I think it was your comment that was like, this is the first, or maybe it was Dirty Tesla, Chris. This is the first build that your wife might be comfortable driving with you using. And that will be my case because my wife will not let me use it while I'm behind the wheel of her Model 3. So I think comfort is essential to this, going much wider out. So I think outside of personalization, I think comfort is the one thing that V11 was kind of lacking, and I'm looking forward to 12.
Yeah, I think they've definitely been making huge improvements in comfort. A lot of people have said, their wife was comfortable with it. I guess depends on where you are a lot too. But this is a huge leap in comfort. This is like nothing else we've ever seen. So much of the roboticness of V11 that was so nerve-wracking and so uncomfortable is just gone. This is going to be like people's wives are telling them, "Why are you driving? Turn the FSD on. I feel more comfortable."
Posted about Rivian's new lower leasing rates. They seem like they drop in prices quite a bit.
Yeah, Rivian is in a concerning position. They have a lot of cash, so I'm not too worried about them going insolvent tomorrow, obviously. And there's a lot of Rivian people who get mad at me for covering this company. And I really like the products. I think they're great. I wouldn't buy one, but people seem to be happy with them. But from a business perspective, you just look at objectively what's going on. And I report this not to slam the company, not because I want them to fail, but just to inform people. There's many people who are investing. When I started covering Nikola, a lot of people said, "Hey, why do you hate them? Hydrogen's clean energy too." And they turned out to be a total fraud. I'm not suggesting they're a fraud, but what I am suggesting is leasing rates fell by about $80 a month. They're cutting prices, right? And did RJ tweet anything crazy? Is he having an opinion about immigration or whatever? Blowjobs? No, he is like the fucking model CEO. Everybody loves this guy. He would never say anything controversial, you know? He's got this nice deep voice. Well, we feel like he's like the dream. This is
He even
like what
goes on CNBC interviews every month.
Yeah,
Monthly
with Jim
CNBC
Cramer.
interviews. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's gonna have his own corner. He's gonna have his own show on CNBC. How to raise capital.
But yet, demand is now lower than supply. They were ramping up production. Now they've actually got more production than supply. They've got inventory in stock. You used to have to wait years. Now you can get an R1S, R1T in 1 or 2 weeks. So I mean, this is actually good news if you're a buyer. If you want an R1S or R1T, it's now way easier to buy one and the price is lower. And also, the price of the R1T and the R1S are now the same on the lease price. It used to be about, I think, like $100 more for the R1S or something. And now they're almost, within $10 of each other or whatever. So, it was okay. Well, the R1T is ramped, the R1S has a ton of demand. Now both of them seem to have their supply ahead of demand. So, I don't know when rates are going to come down or whatever, but at the price point they're at, they eh, they only have this many orders. And it's not about what the CEO says. It's not about whether you buy Twitter or anything like that. This is the nature of the auto market, right? People are looking for affordable cars. They're not looking for a multi-thousand-dollar a month payment, to get a Rivian or something like that, even if they think it's really cool. So
Right. Yeah.
I'll be watching their earnings very closely this month. I think it's going to be a very interesting call. They're at a turning point in terms of the momentum of the
Yeah.
company.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on Rivian. We have a lot going on, and now we have a succinct time slots for these spaces. So let's talk about one of the more important things that are going on right now. Gemini, Google rebranding Bard as Gemini Advanced, and taking on ChatGPT.
Thank God, Bard was a terrible name.
What do you think about that? Do you think they're going to overthrow ChatGPT?
I haven't tried the latest Gemini myself yet, but the commoditization of LLMs is incredible. I think Google is going to have a great model, arguably one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. And with their products, there are so many opportunities within their product portfolio to integrate this model. I think the distinction between Gemini and Bard was actually very interesting. So Bard was the sort of consumer facing application, but Gemini was really this powerful model that was going to do so much more behind the scenes. And I think it is good that they kind of unified the naming, but that's kind of how they were thinking about it. It makes sense for them to have their own model that they trained. I mean, they're fucking Google, and integrate that and use it in their products. And I think they're going to have great success with that. I think many of their cloud customers may use it. Some people may prefer it to OpenAI for a number of reasons. But we're really looking at a landscape which is a lot of really great LLMs, honestly, whether it's from OpenAI, whether it's from XAI, whether it's from Google, whether it's from one of the open source providers or Meta, who's training really strong models with hundreds of thousands of H100s and just releasing the model weights for free online for anyone to use, even for commercial use. So it really is an incredible landscape. And no doubt Google has some of the smartest engineers in the world. They're going to have one of the best LLMs out there. But it kind of also feels like everyone and their mom is doing an LLM. So how do you differentiate yourself in a space like this that has so much capital, so much attention, and so much competition? I'm not really sure.
In the replies, somebody says Gemini has already passed GPT-4 models that aren't in preview only. According to
In
Limsa's
what
chatbot
in what
arena,
metric? In model evals or?
LM says chatbot arena leaderboard.
Yeah, I mean, like, these evals people have shown like they're really kind of, you know, random in a way, or like they're kind of arbitrary. You can make some minor changes to the eval and the rankings will completely flip.
Yeah, so the chatbot arena is different than eval sets, just to be clear. I actually think it's probably the most fair way because
Oh, so
basically what
that's
they're
where
doing.
you rank responses?
Yeah, exactly,
Oh, okay,
exactly.
yeah, that's a much better measure.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the evals. I completely agree with you. Like I think it even came out, right? Like there were some papers that were like, oh, we nailed the biology exams, but you studied on the old exams. And it turns out if you just study the way the questions are asked, you can nail the exams, right? Anybody who's gone to college or done any kind of like coursework can attest to if you can do
And
the
how is, can you help me understand how this method is different than that?
Sure. So this is a double blind approach and it's open source, which is awesome. Grok isn't in there yet. I think that'd be a great pet project. Grok doesn't have a great API right now because you can only really access it through the phone, the mobile app. I think the website works, so I might try and see if I can get it in there that way. But effectively, you go in there, there's like 50 plus models. You ask a question, it randomly picks two models, and you pick left or right, which one you liked better. And then after you pick it, it tells you which model it was. But they use this as a way of like basically competing models against each other. And then they use like chess style ELO ranking to say if a really powerful model beat a not so great model, it doesn't get much reward, but they're actually trying to compete the models against each other and see where they land.
That
So,
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah, so it's much like chess. If you're really really good at chess and then something happens and you become really bad, you could sink really fast. And if you're bad at chess but you suddenly become really good, you could rise really fast. And so you've already seen this. Like I think the old Bard model is now above the paid GPT-4 models. So I think the core takeaway here that everybody should pay attention to is if you don't make your own hardware, you're not going to be able to compete on cost. And Tesla understood this a long time ago. Obviously, Google understood this a long time ago too. I think really AI is a hardware story.
Interesting perspective. How much would you pay? Here's the interesting, or what I believe is an interesting question. How much would you pay to buy ChatGPT today? So Microsoft paid obviously more than 10 billion. How much would you pay today?
I don't think it's worth anything. If I had the opportunity to invest in it, I would not.
Omar, do you
They're,
agree
lo-
with that?
they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars a month already, right? Even with a paid service.
Right.
Agree
Wow.
with what?
That ChatGPT, Microsoft's investment in ChatGPT is not worth anything today.
It's worth the employees.
Well, what do you mean not worth anything? I mean, it's definitely a cash burner today, but they're also, you know, generating a lot of shareholder value, at least, in the perception of the market. And they're generating revenue from services like Copilot, from, GitHub Copilot, from Office Copilot, from their cloud services. In Azure, you can sort of inference the models in a way that run there. So I think it's definitely providing some value to them. I don't think it's necessarily overall positive for them compared to the amount of money they've spent training these models and the $10 billion they've given to OpenAI. But if I were Microsoft, I would definitely be concerned with how quickly everyone else seems to be catching up, whether it's Google or the open source models or whatever. Their shiny crown jewel is looking a little bit less shiny today. And I
What
think
would
it's
you
interesting that X is actually ahead of ChatGPT in the App Store right now. And it's got its own LLM built in, right? So why would people just not, assuming there's no major sort of difference there, why wouldn't people just use that? It has an access to, the data that they're looking at on the X app. It, their future's not really guaranteed. They have to fight for it.
Yeah, I think the core thing here is it's very easy to promise a lot of features and then the cost and how you actually pay for that is the challenge. And if you're building all your companies on top of NVIDIA chips, it's a very unscalable model in my opinion. So
Sounds like ChatGPT reminds me Rivian.
yeah. Or kind of like the older OEMs, right? Like they literally outsourced everything. It's not vertically integrated.
Interesting.
So like have you heard of Scale AI? Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's basically a company that it's like an open secret. it's like a vendor company that many companies hire, including, you know, the big ones that you think of, probably including XAI, OpenAI, all of them. And they're just like vendors that they sit there and they collect data and they like label it for you, and it's used to train models. So even the idea of like collection of data isn't a walled garden. Even the idea of uh, how to do the training, theoretically, for most of these companies is not that differentiated. So the only way you can really differentiate is on hardware, in my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. It's really going to be about the training compute fundamentally.
That's a good segue into Dojo. But before that, Wes?
Hey, Meta, I think I heard you say that you think that companies that solely rely on NVIDIA are fundamentally limited. What is that a correct interpretation of what you said?
I think from a profitability standpoint, yes.
And why do you say that? Just out of curiosity. I feel differently.
Okay, fair. If there are two companies and the key differentiation is software technique, that's one thing. But if everybody's competing on the same RLHF approach, the same PPO approach, the papers that have already been published, then if one company can bring their electrical cost for running the system to 50% of the other company, they can theoretically drop their prices and you get the same quality of product for less.
The thing about these LLMs on the software side is people are very open in the AI research community. They tell each other everything. There really is no secret sauce on the software side.
Yeah, at least we know for a fact a lot of the techniques have been copied and replicated by X, Facebook, and others. Now, there are open lawsuits out there for the use of data sets that maybe didn't have the right copyrights for various other things. That's an open problem. There's obviously like complex things in the multimodal space and all that kind of stuff. But I think what isn't going away is that this industry has been created. What is going to happen though is for the folks that were more flashy, maybe got out quickly, but didn't have like a scalable model, it may not work. And it's kind of reminds me of like, you know, companies that maybe ran really, really fast with really expensive LiDAR and got their cars to drive. But then if they can't figure out a way to get the cost down, software ultimately always becomes a hardware problem.
Well, I agree with that. There's companies that have done much more with the same hardware over time. So I get your point. In the limit, if you change one variable and that variable is foundational, yeah, totally. You know, one company can definitely always supersede another. But that typically we're talking about a very complex organism, which is this, you know, technology stack that we stand on, which is hardware, the infrastructure stack that we stand on. We stand on all of these other complexities. So there's always things to be gained inside of those complexities to make it more efficient. So while I see your argument, and academically it makes sense, I just don't think in practice it is a limiting factor. It may or may not slow you down either. You may actually be able to go faster when you stand on that technology stack. This is a lot of the reasons why you see data scientists and ML practitioners sharing certain strategies because they're trying to get other people's opinions and other viewpoints that they may have not noticed. And other people build on top of them, and it's generally just widely open. But there still are definitely trade secrets, things that companies hold tight to the chest, and they don't let those things out at any cost. I'm not saying that there's, you know, the presumptive like secret sauce, but there still is, and will almost always certainly be, things that companies stand on that they don't want out in the open, that they are using much to their great profit to scale faster than other software companies. Because effectively, I think truly in the limit, that's the thing that you have to do best. You have to scale faster and more efficiently than your competitor. in the software world, or else you die. Because you can generally, everything will be copied over time. Hardware is much more difficult, as you and I both know. Making that is very, very difficult, and the infrastructure surrounding that is also very difficult, and that's much more harder to replicate, which is why companies are continuing to build on their custom hardware. But yeah, I generally see what you're meaning, but I feel like that's way more academic than practical.
Yeah, let me see if I can ground it a little bit more. In order to be really good at making good hardware, it almost necessitates you have to have proficiency in your software stack. But ultimately, if you cannot differentiate on hardware and you're all using the same off-the-shelf hardware, it doesn't matter how good you get at the software proficiency. Someone who has the same software proficiency and has custom hardware will always beat you. Is that fair?
Over time, this is in the limit, right? You're talking about a long time span here. So I can point to Dojo. Dojo is great in theory on paper, but to put it into practice, in other words, it's good academically, but to put it into practice just takes years of development. And, Jensen is such a good competitor. He's keeping up. So for instance, in your estimation, do you think Dojo would be a good investment overall? I would think the answer is yes. But then from, take Jensen's standpoint, do you think him continuing to invest in AI in his platform is a good idea? And do you think he's going to win overall? And I think you might also say yes, because that business continues to outperform anything anyone anywhere has ever done with custom hardware in AI. So yes, you might be right in the limit over time, but it hasn't even been demonstrated yet, not even practically in tests. Like, he keeps outperforming everything. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think you're talking strictly about performance. I'm talking about profit, right? So if their margins are 80%, and you only have to be half as good as them before, on a dollar for dollar basis, it becomes better. If you can get even better than them, then of course it's kind of like, why would you buy their hardware? Now, I agree with you from the trade secret perspective. Every single company that's buying from NVIDIA is not going to wake up tomorrow and have their own custom hardware that meets their own personal needs, and they stop buying NVIDIA chips. So I'm not saying that that's the reason why people stop using it. But like you said with Dojo, if you are a company like Tesla, where you've already built the trip chip, you already have expertise, you've got Pete Bannon, you probably will get to that place. And Apple's shown that they've done it. Google's shown that they've done it. Facebook's already pointed out that they're doing it and they're building out their data center for it. All that kind of remains is Amazon, right?
Amazon's already building that. They've had Inferentia for years, and now they're building their training chip, and I forget what it's called. But in fact, I think they just announced it at reInvent, or whatever their conference is called. And then, Microsoft is too. They have Maya. So they announced that at their conference, it's called Build or something. But yeah, they're all doing it, but they're also doing it just to remain competitive with NVIDIA. So NVIDIA keeps giving them good prices. There just isn't, I get where you're coming from. Yeah, don't get me wrong. But the innovation that you build on top of the hardware is still extremely relevant, not just for performance, but for profit as well.
I agree. Software can still accommodate a lot. And we saw that with things like Alpha Tensor, Alpha Dev, right? If you can drastically reduce your matrix multiplications in your route planning of what you're doing for a neural net, you've effectively just made all your hardware more powerful. So I agree with you in that sense, but I just don't think in the long term, in this specific zoomed in thing about chatbots, I'm not sure that is going to be the differentiation as much as bringing your cost down. Because how many people are willing to pay a lot of money just for the feature of a chatbot?
Yeah, I'm obviously not talking about chatbots. I'm talking about the larger prize here. But my litmus test would be, if you start seeing papers submitted and they're only submitted on custom ASICs only, then I would agree with you. But we just haven't seen that yet. Every single paper is submitted on NVIDIA. So we just don't see any type of custom ASIC papers being submitted. Like even the TPU stuff is all submitted with NVIDIA results as well. So to be sure that people can replicate it, because at the end of the day, that's, you want your paper replicated so you can get credit for it, that you're not just making stuff up, and you're advancing the science. So I see where you're coming from, but I don't see it in practice. It's very, very academic. I still feel that way.
The one counterpoint I would say is most custom ASICs are going to stay behind walled gardens. So until there are multiple parties with large cloud offerings of custom ASICs, I don't think you're going to see folks moving away from NVIDIA as the thing you can reproduce on. But let's say Amazon tomorrow actually had a really big offering, not of an announcement, of an actual thing that was large and replicable, and Microsoft also had one, and Google also has one, right? Then the three of them would allow them to say, okay, well, if you can reproduce in all three systems and they all are charging the prices, unless all three companies are using these hardwares as loss leaders, for all intents and purposes, the paper is reproducible. Today, that's not the case. Today, the only way to reproduce it is to either say the company that has the custom hardware wrote a paper, and the only way to verify it is using their custom hardware and to take their word on the costs of that stuff. That's not a scientific way to reproduce something.
Yeah, I generally would agree, but anybody can do that. Anybody can go use whatever cloud and reproduce those results. My point is a little bit separate, is that because you can always do it no matter what, they could potentially take that away from you. You could argue, though, the large data centers are the same way. Like nobody has their own personal large data center. So at some point it becomes ubiquitous. That's my point. In the limit, we're seeing infinite custom ASIC compute as well that's available publicly with TPUs, and AWS is offering, which I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of their training chip off the top of my head. I should just look that up. But it's publicly available and it's essentially infinite, just like cloud compute is, and anybody can buy it, so you can replicate it. And we're still just not seeing companies do this. We're not seeing Google do it. We're not seeing Amazon do it. We're not seeing Microsoft. We're not seeing those large companies, and definitely not Facebook or Apple. So we're just not seeing that happen. They're all competing with NVIDIA still. And so I feel like, yeah, in the limit academically, I think you're right. And maybe over time that is proven right. But maybe just to put a time span on this, I don't see that happening in the next 10 years, unless Lattner really figures out middleware and he consolidates, training down to it doesn't matter what compute you're using or what infrastructure you're using or what, kind of other methodologies that you're implementing. It just does the right thing. But, we could get into the abstraction layer crap that's involved in that. But at large, I think I've said my piece, though. But I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, just one last food for thought. As LLMs make it more and more where languages can be adapted between each other and they're kind of agnostic and they can optimize for you, I think language differences are going to go away. All the programming languages kind of become English, as Andre Karpathy has put it. And the XFA compilers and stuff are taking off. So I think as there are more players with custom ASICs that are available in cloud settings, the push towards using a generic compiler will naturally cause a shift in the industry.
Omar, can you summarize the last 15 minutes for the rest of us? Festivus for the rest of us, please.
I was kind of spacing out and thinking about Optimus and the VR rig they're developing and data collection. That was kind of like one really interesting sort of job posting that came out. They talked about the VR rig they're developing, and I see Robert Scoble in the audience, and he's always like, Tesla's going to develop an AR VR stuff, and I was kind of like, yeah. I mean, they have kind of really interesting computer vision capabilities, but I don't think so. But now they're basically saying, hey, look, we actually need this stuff to collect data for the bot. So we really need to develop this really insane VR rig just around teleoperating the bot so that we can collect enough training data to train the thing end to end. And so, I had a lot of like interesting thoughts about that. It's like, okay, maybe this is kind of out there, but could this maybe be a consumer product someday? It could be kind of interesting because if you could teleoperate the bot, then you could sell it as a product and it could actually be useful. So imagine Elon Musk wakes up every day. He puts on his Tesla headset. All of a sudden, he's on the floor of Fremont. He's walking the line. He's picking things up. He's talking to people. Next, he's on the floor of Berlin. He's on the floor of Shanghai. He's on the floor of Texas. He's at the Hawthorne factory for the Falcon 9. He's at Starbase, all without getting up. And he's walking around. He's able to manipulate objects. He really feels like he's there with this next generation VR technology. And he has robot bodies in all these places. And he can actually ask the robot to perform some of these tasks for him. He can ask his AI, hey, tell the Starbase robot to go check on this guy, talk to this guy, whatever. And the teleoperation actually generates the training data. Like, that's the missing piece. Because we have all this data of us driving around in the cars that's used to train FSD and has made FSD so well. So where does that training data come from Optimus? Teleoperation could both you have some use cases for the robot. Think about like a dangerous area, a radioactive situation, maybe a school shooter, whatever, where you could teleoperate this robot. And then as the, you know, uh, time goes on, the teleoperation provides the data set for the robot to do more and more of these tasks autonomously. But you can kind of have the human coming in and serving as the training wheels, and sort of jumpstart the production and everything. Get a product out next year that has some autonomous capabilities, but also great teleoperation.
Thank you,
So
Amar.
that's a summary of what I was thinking about, not the conversation,
Thank
but
you. Thank you. That's all right. That's cool. I do listen to these spaces second time and sometimes even a third time when I'm editing and, clipping for shorter clips. And I learned so much from these spaces. Like from my own spaces, I learned so much the second time, third time I listened to it. It's awesome. I love
And
that
this is
fact.
why people should subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. This is why people should subscribe. Go up to the top of your pages. You can see the link, youtube.com/@valueanalyst1. If you could also like and repost that for your followers to see, I would appreciate that.
I think we're going to a world where probably 90% of people won't need to own a car. There's all this expense. And a lot of people said, oh, you're crazy. Maybe in California, maybe in cities. But no, I think probably within the next 10 years, we are going to move to a market where all the hassles of physically owning a car, people don't want to own a car. What they want is transportation. So if someone else can roll up the expenses of registering it, licensing it, and doing maintenance on it, everything like that, the IRS has a standard deduction right now of 67 cents per mile. So that means the IRS thinks it costs you 67 cents a mile on average, really, to like own your car and to drive it. So you could probably charge, 50 cents to a mile per on average, right? And I think you could have some subscription tiers. You could pay more upfront and get a lower price. A lot of people said, well, what if I want to drive 12,000 miles a year? Am I then paying $12,000? And honestly, that's not that far off from when you look at what an average American is paying for everything, their car, their insurance, their maintenance, all of that, if it would all be rolled into one price and you don't have any unexpected things like flat tire expenses or anything like that. So I think you could really actually see, 50 cents to a dollar per mile or more. And the US, okay, and just the US, there were 3 trillion vehicle miles traveled. Okay, so that's today. I'm not even talking about accounting for any increase in vehicles miles traveled. I'm just saying, and I'm not talking about, okay, can we get it to work in China? Can we get it to work in Europe? Just for the US market, 3 trillion miles. So give it any value you want. Give it 50 cents a mile, give it a dollar a mile, whatever you think is practical at scale. I'm going to give it $1 a mile. I think that makes sense when you really look at all the costs and you kind of project things out into the future. Or, let's give it 67 cents or whatever. Then you have basically a multi-trillion-dollar a year market that is going to be created, where people are basically consuming transportation rather than consuming cars and fuel directly. You would have a more consolidated number of players who are still consuming the cars, still consuming the fuel, but it's a much different sort of market structure where you have very high availability. Any parked car can come up and serve a ride. So you can get someone to come up to you very quickly. There's high availability, there's privacy, there's reliability. This wouldn't be like an Uber. So you're really looking at a market that I think just in the United States is going to be a highly competitive multi-trillion dollar a year market. And I think if let's say Tesla could take a third of that market, they could generate $1 trillion of revenue just from the US market potentially, if they could take a third of it, if they could take
Right.
50% or more. So people don't think enough about that. They're thinking about what Elon tweeted today and not really about what Tesla's actually building. And I think what the Waymo incident shows, what the Cruise incident shows, is Tesla has the best self-driving technology in the world, and they're deploying it more safely than anybody else. And they have the ability to deploy it at scale better than anybody else.
Cusp.
Yeah, just a quick question. I've noticed the US have banned a lot of Chinese companies in the Internet of Everything space, and so they're obviously very paranoid about security. And I was just thinking about with that regards to Optimus and the bot, is this going to be a market which is going to be protected from Chinese competition? Which probably means it's I mean, it's going to be hard to get the product, but once it is in place, is there less Chinese competition structurally in the Western world because of the paranoia of having a robot army that could be controlled out of China? So it makes it a better market generally.
Amar, would you like to answer that?
We must say no to protectionism. Protectionism is harmful and it kills people. We must trade freely with all the countries of the world. I mean, look at China. They got deflation right now, which is also an interesting subject. They have massive deflation, 14 straight months of producer price declines. We should be buying their solar panels, buying their batteries, buying all their cheap shit, and transitioning the world to sustainable energy. But, we can't because, we're worried about being reliant on China. Well, once you buy the stuff, it's yours. You buy their solar panels, you buy their batteries, you get to keep them. So it's a little bit silly. I hope the world moves more away from protectionism and that the US and China can reach deals to avoid um, restrictive economic policies. That might not be realistic, but that's what I hope for.
Should I apply for a job at Tesla? All these bot jobs.
Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Thinking about it.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you about that. So, what do you guys think about all these Dojo jobs popping up? Dozens of them. When people thought it was over.
They don't fucking know Tesla. Tesla doesn't give up.
They look like production jobs too. So it looks like they've scaled production, which is a good sign.
Yeah, a lot of people also forget that Dojo is actually running now and there's training jobs running on it for the first time. So they need to obviously maintain the Dojo system, expand it, and develop the next generation system. I think they mentioned a Dojo 1.5, a Dojo 2. So that suggests there's more intermediate steps they're doing and then sort of a bigger architectural leap with 2.0.
Wes, how many Optimus do you think Tesla's producing today?
I wouldn't think that they have more than 20. My thought on the last one that we saw was that it looked like a potential final development unit. In other words, they're just going through tweaks, and then the kind of next revision after that is like a pre-pilot version where they put together all of the parts that they could potentially make into like 1,000 unit run, which is the precursor to soft tool development, which would be like a 10,000 run. And then a hard tool development is like the 100,000 run. So that's where it feels like they're at currently to me.
When do you think Tesla will produce the 100,000th Optimus?
I think by the end of 26, that's a definite possibility. I get there by kind of back calculating it, kind of what I just talked about. So when I see one that looks like it is potentially ready for production, when they demonstrate that, and I'm looking for certain things like, you'd have to kind of be up close and be able to really see it, to see if they're actually like production level quality parts and assemblies and things like that. But that in and of itself takes, somewhere between even Tesla speed, 6 to 12 months to go through that iteration process. And then obviously they have to design new machines to make all of these at scale. So they have to go through that next level of process development and machining. And so that takes another 6 to 12 months. And then they go through iterations of those machines. And that's, really like another at least 9 to maybe 18 months. So I put it at kind of hopefully, like a maybe number, like the end of 26 is my kind of like hopeful timeline. And that's the 100,000, right? We should see them out in the wild, I think sometime next year, like in the wild, like in people's homes. I fully expect that. But then again, that has to be back calculated from V12. Like we kind of have to see more iteration and how fast they iterate on V12. So anyway, there you go.
Omar, do you agree with Wes that we're going to see Optimus in people's homes sometime next year?
I mean, that's the goal of the team. Do I think they're actually going to achieve it? I give it maybe 20%.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely as well. But as Wes said, it's a definite possibility. So it's more than 0% chance. Omar said 20%.
I mean, that is the goal of the team, right? And we know Tesla sets extremely aggressive goals.
When
Saying
did
we're
they
going to have it
communicate
out
that? Did they ever communicate that publicly? That they're going to want
Yeah.
they want to have it in households in 2025?
Elon said on the earnings call, we're hoping to ship the first Optimus units by the end of next week. So he didn't mention households, but shipping units, I don't care if it's really a factory or a household. I consider that shipping.
Omar, I see you pinned something at the top. Would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions people have about Figure is what their ability to manufacture these robots is going to be. So the CEO has posted something showing some part of their manufacturing process, I guess. He says material in, robots out, kind of echoing a sentiment Elon has shared a few times where he talks about raw materials in, products out. So that's a video that he shared.
Thank you. We have a question in the replies from Peter Timble. Why is no one using quantum computing for machine learning? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Quantum computers kind of suck today. They're not really that useful for anything. If someone figured out how to use them for machine learning, then they probably would. But you could give me yeah. The quantum computers today have a very small number of qubits, and they're not really that like you can't even really implement Shor's algorithm on them. So maybe in the future as they evolve and become more common, you would see that, but we don't really have any method for like training on a quantum computer today.
It doesn't really make sense from a cost perspective, but even ignoring that, quantum computers are really good at computing things where you have a lot of states that are potentials that you want to kind of explore, and neural nets are more about you're trying to learn a lot of different possibilities. It's possible maybe somebody comes up with a whole new approach for quantum computing, but none of the techniques today would benefit from it, I don't think.
You know, one of my joys these days on the weekends, you know, a nice activity is to go with a friend, give them a test drive at the Tesla store in Domain, Austin. And we always get either the Model S or the Model X. And it's just an incredible experience. I mean, what an incredible experience. And it's always a funny moment when we go around for an hour, come back, drop off the car, and get into their other car, the car that they own today, the ICE car. And that moment when they turn it on, it feels like they just went back a decade or two. And they know their next car is going to be Tesla. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will talk to you tomorrow.